The following segment is sponsored by Well Green Platinum, trading in the U.S. as WGPLF and on the TSX as WG. Located in the Yukon Territory, Canada, the Well Green project has the potential to become one of the world's largest and lowest-cost open-pit producers of platinum group metals and nickel. Find them on the web at wellgreenplatinum.com.
David Morgan is an expert on silver, gold, and precious metals investments. He's a world-renowned lecturer appearing on CNBC and the Fox Business Channel. He's an author, having penned Get the Skinny on Silver Investing. And Mr. Morgan is a regular contributor and friend of the Ellis Martin Report.
David, welcome back to the program.
It's great to be back, Ellis.
Now, last time we spoke, you were about to take a trip to see some machinery that you roll up basically to a mine site without any infrastructure in place, and you just have at the tailings. That's a very, perhaps, unfair summary of what we discussed last time that we spoke, but welcome back from your trip. Why don't you tell us about it, if you can?
Yeah, I'll give you a few details. One, I learned more. We always do when we go. Really, it doesn't roll itself. It's on a truck, and the unit itself, which I've said on your show and maybe one other, I said it was about the size of a large RV. That's true for that unit, but what I didn't know until I got down there is how much the recycling, purifying of the water system takes. So that's another probably 2 or 3 truckloads. So you're probably looking at 4 trucks, maybe 3, 4, that kind of thing. But it is mobile. I mean, it's not like you have to build a complete mill, which costs, millions usually. This is something that you can bring on site and set up in a relatively short amount of time and recycle the water. There's very little loss and press on. So we'll be writing the full report up, and it will be available the weekend of the 5th, 6th of September. Our reports are due the first Monday of every month. And luckily, I guess you could say, the 7th of September is the first Monday in September. So that gives us a little bit of extra time. And as usual for our premium members, we took some cameras down there, which, as you know from the front page of my website, I filmed one of the principles of this company, explaining very briefly sort of from the front end to the back end and what happens in the process. So thanks for asking. Pretty exciting. I don't want to get too hypey, but for a small miner, somebody that really has ore, it is pretty exciting. It's hard not to, because the ecological footprint is small and you can make money and not dilute shareholders, which is really, really key always, and especially in today's environment when these smaller companies, or larger ones even, but primarily small ones, are almost finding it impossible to find financing. So pretty cool, pretty neat. There are concerns. It's not like absolutely perfect and going to change everything from this day forward, but proof of concept, absolutely convinced, and what remains to be determined in the future, I think, is a matter of just trial and error learning and getting the process to be more and more refined.
And we should probably say that you are an investor in that particular company.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, I am.
The Ellis Martin Report is sponsored by Well Green Platinum. Well Green Platinum is a Canadian mining exploration and development company focused on the active advancement of its 100% owned Well Green PGM and nickel project toward production. A 2015 economic assessment shows the Well Green project, located in the Canadian Yukon, to be potentially the second largest PGM producer outside Southern Africa and Russia, with average annual production of over 200,000 ounces platinum, palladium, and gold, along with 128 billion pounds of nickel and copper from just 34% of the pit-constrained resource, making it possibly one of the largest in the world. Estimates show that once in production with assets near or at the surface, this low-cost producer may generate cash flow exceeding as much as $330 million per year. Situated along a major highway in a mining-friendly jurisdiction with an active market for PGMs and nickel, and with a strong management team, Well Green is certainly to be considered a candidate for your portfolio. Find them on the web at wellgreenplatinum.com. Now, David, since we spoke last, you and I have both been away and we've returned from our respective points on the planet, but a lot's happened in the market. I think at one point the Dow was down about 2,000 points. It's recovered quite a bit, and during that time period I was intrigued, but I was never really worried. What were your thoughts and intuitions telling you?
Well, I was at a seminar in the great Las Vegas again. I've made a couple trips down there this month, one for a seminar and one for this mobile mill we just discussed. So I didn't have my normal, sit in front of the 2 computer screens that I do in my normal day. But I was aware of it because of these smartphones, etc. But I didn't have the same type of feeling, I guess, that I had during the 2008 crisis. I felt that it's being called a correction, so I'll use that term, that the correction was long overdue. It was not a surprise at all. I mean, I put out a warning to our members quite some time ago. It wasn't the exact top, but it was much higher than during this drop-off to really lighten up or get out or protect with puts. I said all three, so to beware that there'll probably be some pullback. I thought it'd be September, October. Obviously started at the end of August, but I made that call, I don't know, a month or two ahead anyway. So it's something that I knew would happen by the pattern in the stock market. A lot of people say technical work doesn't work, and let me be the first to state it doesn't work consistently 100% of all the time. But one of the most expensive books I have on technical analysis is by, I think it's Ted Williams, and it talks about the accumulation pattern, the markup, and the distribution pattern, and the markdown. And if you go through the whole book and read it and study it, it actually clarifies a lot of things. So we've been in the distribution pattern for a long time. And Jim Sinclair was recently on USA Watchdog. You may have watched it. Actually, I watched it twice, one of the very few interviews I've ever watched twice. He talked about, I forget his terminology, but mine is interior deterioration, meaning that you have a high price but low volume. That's a very clear signal to anybody that does technical work or even common sense. If something is plentiful and it's selling at, and there's very few buyers, the price is going to come down. And that's basically where we're at, and been that way for a long time. What happens is the power money or the smart money, whatever you want to call it, buys low and accumulates so they don't move the market up. So they have to chip away and chip away and chip away and chip away, just buy a little, buy a little, buy a little, buy a little, not disturb the market very much. And then when they're ready, they mark it up. So they start buying bigger blocks for a little while. Remember, these big blocks they're buying are just teeny little percentages of what they've already accumulated during the accumulation phase. So then they start to move the market in. Oh, the public are lemmings. Oh, look at that. It's moving. And there's a lot of people that are taught to trade on momentum. I'm one. I'm taught on. I know how to do it. Do I do it often? No, not that often. But anyway, point being that the stock or commodity or whatever it is starts to take off, and it kind of feeds on itself. So the public gets in and moves up, 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 up. And then you've got a big position. You got to distribute it. You got to sell it to the unknowing, the unwashed, the lemmings, whoever. I don't want to be derogatory. I just want to...
Too late, David.
I just want to be clear. There's a lot of hype. Stock market only goes up. You can never lose money in stocks if you held stocks for the long term and all this stuff. So they start to distribute. Well, they distribute the same way they accumulate, little by little by little by little by little by little, until they sold all their stock and not brought the price down, because if they sold it all at once, it'd take the market down really quickly. So you have the accumulation, the markup, and the distribution, and then, of course, they go the other way. They short the market, and then they sell their last, like, a couple big blocks and get that going, and then the public, we'll call them, comes in. Oh, my goodness, it's a panic. We're going to sell. So having said all that, that's how the markets work, and I think I did a little more in-depth talking about it than I have in the past, although I like to talk about how markets move, because I think it's very important for anybody that's in the market to understand fully how a market moves, because without that knowledge, then it's hard to make the argument about manipulation or anything. So if you don't understand the fundamentals, then it's not very easy to carry on the conversation to any depth. So coming back to the crisis or this crash, I'm of the opinion, first of all, it's a fact that the global financial system is more precarious than it was in 2008. That can be proven pretty easily. As far as, when, where is it going to happen? We know why, but when, we really don't know, but there's a lot pointing to, when I said earlier, it's September, October. So is this the precursor to the crash? Jim Sinclair certainly thinks so. Is it going lower? I think it is. How much lower? I really don't know. I mean, I read like anybody on the internet quite a bit. I mean, there's pundits out there saying 5,000. One I read said 4,500. Others said they'll never get below 6,000. Others say, this is just a brief correction and, it's going to come back and keep going up. So, take your pick. Personally, from a value basis, it's overvalued, and it would have to come back substantially lower than it is today to reflect the true state of the economy. So that would be my take on the market. And what will that do? Well, it depends. I mean, it would probably affect almost everybody, because even if you're not in the stock market, if the physical economy is deteriorating and the stock market reflects reality, meaning that things aren't as good as we keep hearing on the mainstream media, then you're probably going to see further deterioration in the day-to-day lives of people. But, I want to give a caveat there, Ellis, if I might.
Sure.
And that is that the lifestyle is so high for Americans in general, even people that are on food stamps or whatever, relative to 1/3 of the world, that it's ridiculous. I mean, they're living in absolute luxury on a relative basis. The overall technological boom from like the 19th century onwards, so the last 100+ years, has been so phenomenal that the average person in North America is living better than any 15th or 16th century king ever dreamed of. So it's a matter of perspective in my point of view. I mean, I'm only saying this to get people to think a little bit. So basically, if there were a huge crash in the markets, and the Dow did go to, say, 5,000 as an example or as a thought experiment, and economic conditions slowed to, pick a number, let's just say half of what they are now. In that case, certainly there would be a lot of unhappy people. I would be one of them. Certainly there would be lots of depression. I mean, depression is named that for a reason. People generally are depressed, they're unhappy, they're sad. Their lives have changed in a way that they don't want, and they feel they don't have much control, and there's a lot of connotations around the word depression. And the idea being that even in that case, which I think will happen, by the way, it's not like I think that, we're going to be, the stock market's going to move up and that QE is going to fix things. I am on the other side. I really don't think it's fixed anything, and I think we are in for a big comeuppance, and I think it's going to happen relatively soon, and I also think it's probably going to take place starting sometime this fall. Again, to quote Jim Sinclair, since I watched him twice, he said there would be, I'm going to misquote him, but the idea was that by the end of the year, everybody's going to know this thing is for real, meaning this stock market change. So back on point, I think that even in that case, we can get through it, and we're still a lot better off on a relative basis. I mean, does that make you happy or sad? I don't know. It's your perspective. Only you can make that determination, which means some people will be able to see it clearly and look at it as probably something that is an opportunity, not just something that is, oh my goodness, look at this, how are we ever going to that? Because if you look at the Great Depression, as bad as it was, and it was, there was a lot of innovation. This type of thing is a motivator for people, and some get motivated and some don't, but it's an opportunity, in my opinion, that's there for, really it's there for everyone, and it's to reevaluate your lifestyle, maybe reevaluate some of your lifestyle habits, maybe reevaluate what you need versus what you want, and on down the line. We could go on and on, Ellis. I get a lot of stuff that I read, look at, etc., in different forms, audio, video, printed word, and of course the internet. And one of them, I get an audio summary every month, and they did an outlook, and this is a pretty mainstream type publication. It wouldn't be considered alternative media, although it's a subscription service and it's not really well known. And they looked at all these disaster scenarios, and they had it analyzed by a statistician about, what was the likely outcome of each. And I don't have it in front of me. I wish I did, because I didn't plan on saying this, but all the things from a meteor hitting the earth to coronal mass ejection to viral breakout to, on and on. And they had like 10 of them. And they went through every one of them, very factually oriented, and so what were the probabilities of each of these things? And what was interesting was that some of them that I thought were just way out there percentage-wise were actually higher than some of the ones I thought were more likely. So maybe I can dig that out. We could do it again on the show. But the idea being that we, and I'll include myself in this, seem to be oriented more on the problem than the solution. There's this, then there's that, and there's others. And there are big problems. I mean, if you look at something that's very seldom talked about, is Fukushima. I mean, is the Pacific dying off? You've got these weather patterns that are basically destroying California, and that's the breadbasket of the nation. I mean, California by itself at one time was like 1/6 of the global economy. I think now it's 1/8, but that's a big hit. If you've got zero interest rate policy that really isn't working. So we are facing some real major challenges, but I want to call them challenges. I don't want to say that it's the end or that things are going to stop or anything along those lines. It's going to be a shift. It's going to be a word that's overused, reset. And when the reset happens, again, I urge everyone that listens to think about their own personal you. What do you value the most? What is needed most by you? And, I don't get on this topic too often, Ellis, but I'll put my neck out there because certainly I'm used to doing it. And from my perspective, you don't have to agree or disagree, but we still have free speech, believe it or not. And from a spiritual perspective, it may be valuable to some of us because, again, it goes back to where have I been living my life? Where have I been putting my attention? And where has my energy been flowing? Geez, my attention's been to get up the corporate ladder and work for this company. And, in my heart of hearts, I really don't like bringing the next fill in the blank to the public or my fellow people at large, because I don't really believe in what they build or what they make or what they process or the food they grow or whatever it is. And that's going to be in some cases it isn't. What I'm trying to state, and I'll try to be succinct, is it's a very good time to be self-reflective and contemplative and really think through what it is that you really want to be living your life for. Very few people even have time for that. They get in the rat race or they get on the hamster wheel and they start spinning and they spin, and then they get off on the weekend and they, watch TV or do a sport or whatever, go grocery shop and do their laundry and get back on the hamster wheel. And that's their whole lives. And that's not, in my view, that's a life that really we weren't created for. I think we were created to blossom and be our best and to thrive in all these things. So I've been philosophical today. I probably droned on too much. Probably I'm going to get a lot of negative thumbs down on this idea. But what I want to be clear on, I'm going to summarize, is yes, I think the bigger event than 2008 is ahead of us. I do think that the human instinct and survival instinct and the ingenuity and spirituality of most people, I think, is very strong, and I think we can get through it. Not to excuse that there won't be pockets of very extreme behavior, because I think there will be. But I do think when the dust settles that the reset will be more community-oriented. I think the top-down centralized power will deteriorate. That'll be more community. And I know that's maybe a stretch now because everyone looks at Big Brother as being all-knowing and all-powerful, and certainly they give that impression, listening to everything we do and watching everything we do and tracking everything we buy and all of that stuff. But believe it or not, it's very difficult to pick a top, and usually when things look the strongest is when they actually are the weakest, just like in the stock market. Unless you knew that the deterioration was happening because of low volume. It's the same thing at the federal government level or the nation-state level, across the board, not just in the U.S. or Canada, but we're talking throughout not only the Anglo-American empire, but all empires out there. And so I am looking for a big reset in many different ways. So I probably droned on a little too long, Ellis, but that's my look at it. You asked, so you got an answer.
So we're not just talking about a market correction. We are talking about a fundamental lifestyle correction potentially here in the United States and around the world.
Absolutely.
Which will cause us to be very introspective and to really evaluate who we are. And we might as well get started with that before that potential eventuality and, let's say, clean house and decide what's important to us and live life for what we enjoy. And then perhaps the income and the money that we've been worrying about will just follow suit. At the end of the day, though, we're probably all going to have shelter and food, right?
I think so. I mean, it doesn't hurt to put some food away. I want to be consistent here because it's a zero-lose bet. I mean, if you have extra food, the worst thing is you have to eat it. So I'm not against doing that. I do think, again, that the collective would be very dispersed, but communities would develop and people know how to survive. I mean, if you look at what's happened in the past on case-by-case basis, if you go to Argentina or Cuba, you get a pretty good outline of when things collapse, quote-unquote collapse. I mean, did everyone die? No. They made huge adjustments. They got along. They grew food. They had these little farmers markets or bazaars or flea markets, whatever you want to call them. People bartered. They survived. And in some cases, Cuba actually was eating better than they had before because all this food being grown by everybody was organic and everybody was out there, being a farmer. It's laughable, but no, it's kind of cool in my opinion. So no, people are not going to just give up. They're not going to just say, oh my goodness, my stock portfolio is worth half of what it was 2 months ago and life's over. I'm going to say, some may say that, but the vast majority will say, I'd be extremely unhappy, but what do I do now? Or what do I do next? Or what's the solution to this problem? And I think a lot of people will just have to ask the question of, how do I get by on less? How do I get by on less money? How do I get by on less food? How do I get by on less fill in the blank? And when there's some scarcity, it's appreciated more. And we are in not only the information age, we're in the information overload age, and we're in the reign of plenty. That's a name of a book by a Frenchman I haven't finished. It's a very difficult read, at least for me. But the reign of plenty is now. And again, it's hard to pick a top. It's like, God, if I go to the grocery store and there's 45 different kinds of pickles I could buy. We're in the reign of plenty. It's like, this is never going to stop. It's always going to be like this. There are always going to be 27 different types of breads and 45 different kinds of pickles and 27 kinds of ketchup. You know what? That's a top, not a bottom. And I'm calling it top. Is it today? No. Is it next week? No. But I'd say within the next 2 to 3 years, yeah, you're going to go back in, I'd say 4 years from now. At least treat this as a metaphor, if not an actual reality. That you'll go in, the store will be there, but there's not 15 brands of ketchup. There's maybe 2. And that's kind of like when I was a kid. When I was a 10-year-old, you went in the store, there was like Del Monte or Hunt's pickles. You had sweet pickles, dill pickles, and you had 2 brands to choose from. And the shelf space was, a foot wide maybe. So I'm just trying to give an analogy here, or a metaphor for what we're talking about. And the way I see it, is it going to be the way that David Morgan sees it? No, it won't. It'll be different. You could dream up any scenario that I give, Jim Sinclair gives, Greg Hunter gives, any of these guys, any of these gals. Catherine Austin Fitz, very brilliant woman, very, very smart. I really admire her and what she says, what she stands for, and her being solution-oriented. But even as good as she is, and her scenario, it's probably going to come out different than any of us. But I think the flavor of it, or the general outline of it, I think you could take that to heart, because I think most of us agree things are going to get different. There is going to be a change. It is going to demand for people to basically reevaluate significantly their lives and what they're going to do about them going forward.
You mentioned being a 10-year-old, and I can reflect back to that when we had a lot less choices. And didn't we feel like at the time that those were the good old days? Wasn't life good? And should we be saying now these are the good old days?
Well, in a way, I mean, it depends on the individual. So, I kind of liked it simple. There's only a choice of dill pickles or sweet. I want dill pickles on my sandwich, and I put it, I wasn't shopping at 10 years of age, but I was with my mom when she was. But, you went through the aisle pretty quick. I mean, really, now I get in there and I'm like, gosh, do I want the ruffle cut onion-based pickle with a twist of lime, or do I want the, I was like, what? I mean, it just gets to be almost absurd at some point with so many choices. But I mean, like the bread aisle, I mean, whatever. The further point is, sometimes simple means elegant. If you can do something very simply, that's elegant. Elegance is a nice word, and I like it. I think we've gone too far. The pendulum has gone too far. We've overconsumed, we've underappreciated, and we have become not introspective enough to evaluate what we really want in our heart of hearts, or what's the most meaningful for our lives. So I say those 3 things are going to be very much in the fore, not in the background, in the coming months and years ahead.
So too much saturated fat, ladies and gentlemen, too much. David, tell us about the Morgan Report.
Okay. I think the best thing for anyone that just wants to get on the email list is just go to the front website, TheMorganReport.com. Scroll down. If you scroll down to the bottom, it's not a very long page, you have a little box. You put in your first name and your email, and you get on an email list. So any interview I do like this, we take a question of the week from the readers, and you get a lot of free information. So what happens during the week, and summarize it, and all that's for free. And then we have a YouTube channel, Silver Guru. We have a Twitter feed at Silver Guru 22. And then we have, of course, the paid service, which goes in from the basic service to the premium service to the mastermind service. The basic service is once a month newsletter with updates, no extra charge on the updates. And then the premium service is the basic service, plus we do videos of like our mining excursions and also on the markets. I just did one last night. In fact, I answered. Our premium service is allowed to email me directly with a question, and sometimes the questions are so good I just get out the video and answer the question for everybody that's on the premium service, because it carries over. In fact, it was just asked, what if 2008 happens again? What do you think? Blah, 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 blah. And so I went through that a little more succinctly than I did just now. And then the mastermind is for a high-level investor that really has a lot in the natural resource market, the economy at large, but primarily in the resource market and or gold and silver. Those people are people that really want to stay tuned in, and at that level you get pretty close to me and what I'm doing and what I'm thinking about, etc., along with a special program once a month that's geared to pretty much what the mastermind people dictate.
Well, David, another great conversation. Thank you so much. I always enjoy when we talk about the human spirit and the American heart and how to really proceed forth in uncertain times. Thank you so much for joining us today in the program.
My pleasure, Ellis. Thank you.
I've been speaking with the silver guru, David Morgan. His website is TheMorganReport.com. Listen to this segment again on the homepage of our website, EllisMartinReport.com, or download the entire Ellis Martin Report on iTunes. The preceding segment is sponsored by Well Green Platinum, trading in the U.S. as WGPLF and on the TSX as WG. Located in the Yukon Territory, Canada, the Well Green Project has the potential to become one of the world's largest and lowest-cost open-pit producers of platinum group metals and nickel. Find them on the web at wellgreenplatinum.com.